So today I've titled my sermon Untouchable because God's been really challenging me about how I respond to difficult situations. You know, in today's society, comfort is the ultimate goal. And so when storms hit our lives, we don't know what to do. We crumble, or at best we endure it. But God wants us to be more resilient than that. He wants us to be free so that when the storms of life come, we have joy in our hearts. And yes, we experience the grief, the pain, the hurt, but that is not all. It doesn't cripple us. We are untouchable. Our faith is untouchable. So we're going to have a look at the life of Caleb. He's someone I love in the Bible. And, there are only a few verses about Caleb in the Bible, but it tells such an amazing story. And a lot of you will know him as one of the 12 spies that went into the land of Canaan to scout it out. And he was one of the 2 spies that gave a positive report. Yes, we can take this land. And 10 came back saying, no, we can't, we're going to die. And as a result, they had to go back into the desert, 40 years waiting for a whole generation to die before they could take the land. So I hope that we can go a little bit deeper today, explore what it would be like to be Caleb, and I hope that helps us on our journey. So the first part of the journey is after they've left Egypt. God's done these incredible plagues to convince Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, to be free. There's 12 plagues. It's incredible. You can read about it in Exodus. And then he parts the Red Sea, and the Israelites go across not on damp land. God even dries it up for them. And after they cross over, he closes it over the Egyptian army who are pursuing them, so they're destroyed. The Israelites didn't even have to lift a finger, so they've got high hopes. They're going to the promised land. They're full of faith. But the problem is that they are a complaining people. They complain about, I don't have enough food. It was better in Egypt. I don't have enough water. And they go on and on and on. And here's Caleb. He's trying to keep his faith. It's like for us this week, our family got sick. And the first 2 days, Pete and I were full of faith. Yes, Jesus is going to heal. By his stripes we're healed. By the 3rd day, we're so tired. The kids have been waking up through the night. Oh, can we be bothered praying again? And it's easy to complain. And on Friday night, would you believe it, I showed Peter my preaching notes, and he pretty much said, this is not going to work. So I go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So he says, it's all right, it'll be fine, I'll help you tomorrow. So yesterday morning, he wakes up with a fever. So I have to try to manage to do the notes by myself, and then I had the gastro attack late afternoon. And I'm like, Jesus, how can I not complain about this? And it's so easy to lose the faith. But Caleb kept the faith. And I think the way that he did that was to look back and go, okay, this is what God has done. He did all these miracles in Egypt. He kept us safe. The hail, the flies, the boils, the firstborn dying, the darkness, and yet we were safe. And so I can trust in God to provide. And the other thing is, Caleb's dad was actually from an enemy nation, from Edom. Most scholars believe that. If you don't, that's okay. But I think it makes the story really cool. And so, his mom is an Israelite. His dad is from an enemy nation. To the Israelites, they would have thought he is a half caste. He is not pure. We don't respect him. He shouldn't be part of our family. The movie Sleeping with the Enemy, I've never seen it, but this is the biblical equivalent, So imagine going through that. And we know what that's like. We've all been through stages in our lives where we haven't fit in, where we feel like, we just can't fit in. And growing up, every time I went to a new school, it took me ages. The first group of friends I chose would always reject me. I don't know why. Maybe just discernment issues. But, after I got accepted, it was fine. But we know what it's like to feel like that, to feel like nobody wants you, nobody needs you. Why am I even here? Why did Caleb stay with them when they treated him that way? I think it's because he saw what God did, and he said, this is a God that is worth serving. This is a God that is worth following. I don't care what these people are doing, but this God is with them, and so I'm sticking around. And God has such a heart to meet with his people, and he still does today. So he comes down on a mountain and he tells Moses, bring all the Israelites to the base and I'm going to speak to them personally so they don't have to hear me through you anymore. And so Moses tells the Israelites and they come. And Exodus 20 verse 18 to 19 says, when the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. And God granted their request. So Moses would have to give them secondhand revelation. But imagine if you were Caleb. You've been following this God and you're like, oh, I can't wait till I hope I have the opportunity to meet him. And here it is. And he's scared as well because it's quite terrifying. The mountain is shaking and everyone around him is afraid. But I bet that inside he was going, I'm going to push past this fear and I'm going to meet this God and I'm going to hear him for myself. And imagine his disappointment when he couldn't. He would have been devastated. And here we've got people who have had hopes taken away, a dream job, or, you've had a girlfriend or boyfriend, it didn't work out, or whatever it is, and it's devastating. And it would be so easy to get angry at the people and go, that's it, you've ruined my life enough, I'm not going to live with you anymore. But Caleb chose to forgive. He saw how God forgave these people, even though they complained and they grumbled, and he still provided. And so Caleb said, I can forgive too. And how do I know this? Because if you're chosen to represent your tribe, to be a spy, it means that you are in a leadership position. It means that he would have to forgive. He would have to work with these people and earn their respect. So what has God done for you in the past? What can you draw from to help you in any situation that comes your way today? Judah's great at reminding me of the past. Something happened a few months ago, and till today he says to me, Mummy, yesterday we took the bus and you tripped and fell and dropped Ben, and Ben cried and cried and cried. Do you remember? I'm like, yes, I do. And how's your knee, Mummy? Is it better? And this is months ago. So he's great at reminding me of that. And we find it so easy to remember the bad things that have happened. How about the good things? We serve a good God. It says he works all things out for our good. So even if you think, oh, that probably wasn't God, if it was good, it probably was. In Singapore, I was in high school, and if you know Singapore culture, literature and history, stuff like that, it's not valued, but I love those subjects. So out of the 8 subjects I did, I had to do triple science, double maths, and I was struggling. I was failing. I didn't know what to do. I even bought textbooks that, like dummies for physics or whatever it's called. And I was really struggling. But at the end of the year, I think year 11 equivalent exams, I had 7 distinctions. I don't know how that happened. And, that is my past. I pull on it now when, things are difficult, when there's pressure. Once we've experienced a miracle, we lose the right to doubt God's provision in that area. In Matthew 14 and 15, it talks about the miracle that Jesus did, breaking the 5 loaves and 2 fish and feeding 5,000 men, not including women and children. And in Matthew 15, 7 loaves and a few fish to feed 4,000 men. But the thing we don't realize is Jesus broke the bread and the fish. He gave it to his disciples, and they gave it out. They were the ones who multiplied the bread. It multiplied at their hands as they were giving it out. So they experienced it firsthand. And yet, in Matthew 16, verse 5, it says, when they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. Be careful, Jesus said to them. Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. They discussed this among themselves and said, it is because we didn't bring any bread. Now, he's not talking about bread at all. He's talking about the religious spirit. And yet, because they didn't get the 2 miracles that they'd seen, they worried about bread. And it's the same with us. We tend to forget what God has done. We tend to overlook things and go, oh, that was insignificant. It was just a little thing. And we miss out on the power of testimony. the second part of his journey happens when they've got to the promised land. So he's sent in, he's looking through the land. You know, for all you gardeners out there, this is your dream garden. The soil was so good that the things didn't just grow well, it grew into humongous proportions. You know, and he was thinking, yes, I can see my family and I settling in here. He's excited, he's ready to bring the report back. And then these 10 spies say, no, we're going to die. And look in Numbers 14. Joshua and Caleb said, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. And yet the people didn't listen. And because of that, they had to turn around and go back into the desert for 40 years as he watched his friends and his family die, leaving only him and Joshua. Imagine that. We know what it's like. You know, we've had people betray our trust or hurt us or reject us. And, you know, some of us have experienced death of loved ones, and it's really hard. And here he is doing it for 40 years. And yet he chooses to forgive. He chooses to look at what God is doing in the now. God is still providing miraculously out of the sky bread. God is producing miraculously out of rocks water. God is keeping their clothes and shoes from wearing out, even though they've walked in the desert for years. And even though Caleb is getting older, his strength is not wearing out. It's crazy. We'll read the scripture later, but it's just ridiculous how that happens. And, you know, he's watching the next generation come up, and they're exactly the same as their parents. They're complaining, they're grumbling. He could easily have gone, oh, are things ever going to get better? And we can think the same thing too. You know, Pete and I had a really bad argument one night, and we didn't resolve it. I know you're supposed to, but we didn't. And woke up the next morning, and Pete was super discouraged. He was thinking, he said, oh, are things ever going to get better? And Judah wakes up. He goes, Daddy, my cut's getting better. And then he looks at him and goes, Daddy, it will get better, won't it? And Pete has to say, yes, it will get better. And in that moment, God spoke to him, said, yes, it will get better. And we resolved our argument. Our marriage is intact. So it's all good. But, you know, it's in the little things. We tend to miss it because of the mundane things that are happening every day. We forget to look and go, okay, what is God doing right now? And Pastor Joel preached a couple of weeks ago going, if God is not Lord, then everything else falls out of place. And I've been practicing it. I know I should practice it before that, but that really triggered it. And when the kids are crazy, sometimes I can't physically stop and go, Jesus, you are Lord. But inside me, I stop. I make all the noise stop, and I just go, Jesus, I make you Lord again. I exalt you in this place. And you just watch the atmosphere in your home, the atmosphere in your workplace, the atmosphere in your schools change as you make Jesus Lord. And you see, because then you can see clearly what he's doing in the now. On Tuesday, Judah had a 39-degree fever. Yes, I gave him Panadol. But we also prayed, and the fever never came back. So I thanked God for that. But he still had a cough. He still had a runny nose. So what does that mean? Does that mean that God didn't heal? No. It means he's in the process. It means he's wanting me to be thankful along the way. And that's what we need to do with the present. What is God doing now? So after wandering around for 40 years, everyone dies except Joshua and Caleb. And they come to the Jordan River. It is flooded. It's overflowing its banks. It's crazy. You couldn't make it across. Even a strong swimmer would drown, and they're all like, oh my gosh. And then God parts it, just like the Red Sea. Now, only Caleb and Joshua would have witnessed it, and they would have taken it. This is confirmation. We are taking the land. Hooray. So they're going across. And then God says, stop here and get circumcised. Now, that means the enemies could get to them while they're recovering, and they wouldn't be able to retaliate. But Caleb keeps trusting. He goes, God promised me this land. We are not going to die. Even when God said, march around the city walls 7 days, he did it. Imagine, the first day they marched around, the enemies would have been shaking. This God, he can part the Jordan River. What are they going to do now? The second day, they're just walking around. By the third day, they're probably making fun of the Israelites as they finish walking and go back to camp. They're probably going, what is this God? He thinks he can, win this war by making you walk around. This is so silly. And they're hurling insults and everything. But Caleb kept trusting. Have you ever thought about it? That's really not the most incredible plan, but it worked. On the seventh day, the walls collapsed. They went in, they conquered the land, and they are, exultant. And yet, 5 years later, they are still fighting. They're still enemies. They haven't settled down. 5 years later, God can give us a breakthrough. And then there comes a slump where we think things are going backwards. God, what are you doing? Or God tells us to do something and we are faithful with it. But then we get persecuted and we're thinking, God, we're doing this for you. How can you let this happen to me? Or God is taking too long. We're getting tired. We're tired of doing the right thing, to keep fighting to do the right thing, even though everyone else around us is complaining and going off doing their own things. But we have to keep in mind, what has God promised us? Because he is faithful. Now, Caleb kept that promise in his mind. He replayed it over and over so that when it came time, those 5 years of fighting, he came to Joshua and he knew exactly what to ask. In Joshua 14, he was the spokesperson. So that means that he was still their leader. He didn't, go into isolation. I would have gone into isolation and become a nun. They were so annoying. But, he just kept going. And this is what he said. You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea, about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me to explore the land, and I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. How awesome would it be to be able to declare that? So on that day, Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself have heard that the Anakites, who are giants, are there, and their cities are large and fortified, but the Lord helping me. I will drive them out, just as he said. Then Joshua blessed Caleb and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So he goes ahead. See, he's kept the faith. Even though there's still giants in the land, and he's 85 years old, he says, I can do this. I can take this. And so he goes, and in Joshua 15, he does something interesting. Verse 14, from Hebron, Caleb drove out the 3 Anakites, so the giants, and from there he marched against the people living in Debir. And Caleb said, I will give my daughter Aksah in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sefer. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it. So Caleb gave his daughter Aksah to him in marriage. Now think about it. Caleb obviously wants to raise up the next leader, the next generation, but he didn't turn to his sons. That tells us possibly that his sons were the same as everyone else. They were grumbling, they were complaining, they were faithless. He had tried to bring his sons up in the zeal of the Lord. Imagine, your sons are all grown up and they're the same as everyone else. They just want to settle down. Dad, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to prove? You're 85. Why are you going to fight? And so he had to come up with a plan. Okay, I'm going to set a test. Whoever will obey the Lord and keep driving out the enemies, that will become my son-in-law. And that was a wise choice because Israel failed to do that. They fell into sin and God had to give them over to their enemies. But every time they called out, he raised up a deliverer. And the first judge that he raised up, look at it, Judges 3 verse 9. But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel, who is Caleb's son-in-law, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them. And from there, Israel enjoyed 40 years of peace. If Caleb had not decided, my God has been good to me, he is good to me now, and his promises are faithful, he would not have left a legacy. He would just have become one of the nameless Israelites who kind of took the land but then kept losing it because of sin. But he left a legacy. He inherited the land for him and his descendants. You know, when we pray for Judah, sometimes he'll tell me, but Mummy, I'm still not well. And thankfully, God drops this thought in my head, but you always get well, don't you? That means Jesus always heals you. Not always immediately, but he always heals you. It's easy to think that God breaks his promises when it's not done in our time and our way. But if we look for the fulfillment of his promise rather than at what he seems not to be doing, we'll see it come to pass. In Luke 17, it's a story about Jesus meeting 10 lepers, and they want him to heal them. And he says to them, go, show yourself to the priests. And so they go on this journey, and along the way they're healed. Even Jesus didn't heal immediately. Sometimes he wants us to trust his word and go on the journey. Imagine if these lepers were offended and said, no, I'm not doing it. Then they wouldn't have received the healing. What are the promises that God has made to you personally? Even in the Bible is filled with promises. We just have to look. One of my favorite promises is Isaiah 41 verse 10. It says, do not be afraid. I am with you. I am your God. Let nothing terrify you. I will make you strong and help you. I will protect you and save you. You know, I failed my driving test 4 times. Automatic. Peter thinks it's hilarious. He tells everyone, what, thanks, Pete. And so on my 5th one, I got this test person, what they call it? Oh my gosh, my brain. Instructor, that one. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, and he said to me when he got in, I'm not talking to you except to give you instructions. Don't talk to me. We're just going to do this test. I'm like, oh no, I'm going to fail again. It's my 5th time. So I just recited this in my head. I'm like, God, you promise you're going to be here. And I passed. I mean, the instructor said to me at the end, you're going to be back here soon. Your driving is terrible. I'm like, why are you giving me a pass then? Anyway, so God's promises, if we cling on to it, we will overcome. This isn't a formula to live an untouchable life, but it is a way to show ourselves and other people that we are surrounded by God's goodness and faithfulness in the past, in the present, in the future. What we focus on will grow and become the foundation from which we live our life. And I'm going to get the worship team up now. We're going to sing a song. And I really believe that God wants to do some healing here today, some encouragement, whether it's something that you've experienced, whether it's things that people have done to you, whether there's a hurt there, whether you've stopped believing, whether you can't trust God anymore. I pray that today as we sing this song that it will bring hope to your heart again, that the words of this song will become true for you.